Spain lifted the World Cup trophy at MetLife Stadium in front of more than 80,000 fans, and the record-breaking numbers kept climbing well after the final whistle. More than 6.6 million fans attended matches across the entire expanded 48-team tournament, a record for any World Cup in history. Stadiums averaged over 65,000 fans per match, filling roughly 99.7% of every seat that was put up for sale. Combined television rights and sponsorship income pushed total tournament revenue past €7 billion, the largest figure FIFA has ever reported for a single World Cup. Almost every headline in the days after the final focused on the trophy, the attendance records, and the players who broke them on the field. But away from the pitch, inside the coaching offices of national football federations, a completely different and much less celebrated story was unfolding. Winning a World Cup, it turns out, changes very little about how federations treat the coaching staffs who did not manage to win it. A World Cup is not only a tournament for players chasing a trophy, it is also a hiring and firing cycle that almost nobody plans for outside of it. Some head coaches resigned quietly within days of elimination. Others were removed before the closing ceremony in Los Angeles had even finished. By the time the trophy itself was handed out, national federations across dozens of countries were already actively rewriting their coaching staffs. This video is not really about who won the tournament. It is about who lost their job because of how the tournament went for them. The fastest coaching departure of the entire tournament happened before most casual fans had even settled into watching the group stage properly. It set a record that had reportedly never happened before anywhere in the recorded history of the Men's World Cup. Not a record for scoring goals, or for goalkeeper saves, or for total stadium attendance across a tournament. A record, instead, for how quickly a national federation is willing to formally end a coach's contract. That particular record starts in Monterrey, Mexico, on the very first weekend of the entire tournament. Tunisia had hired a new head coach back in January, just a matter of months before the World Cup itself began. Sabri Lamouchi took charge of the national team with barely half a year to build and prepare a squad for the world's biggest stage. Tunisia opened the tournament against Sweden in Group F, playing their first match in Monterrey in front of a global audience. The result was a 5-1 loss, one of the most lopsided opening matches anywhere across the entire tournament. Tunisia's federation did not wait around for a second match before deciding how to react to that scoreline. Within 24 hours of the final whistle, Lamouchi was no longer Tunisia's head coach at all. It became, by most accounts, the fastest managerial dismissal in the recorded history of the World Cup. No head coach had reportedly ever been removed after only a single match at a World Cup finals before this. Coaches had certainly been dismissed mid-tournament before. At the 1998 World Cup, it reportedly happened on 3 separate occasions. But those earlier dismissals came after at least 2 matches, sometimes 3, giving a coach at least some chance to adjust course. Lamouchi never got that chance. One match, one lopsided scoreline, and the decision from the federation was already made. Tunisia's federation moved almost immediately to a replacement, appointing Hervé Renard to lead the squad through the rest of the tournament. Renard took over a team that had already been eliminated from any meaningful contention before he had even run a single training session. The coaching swap changed nothing about Tunisia's group stage outcome. The team still did not advance beyond the opening round. What it did change was the bar for exactly how fast a national federation is now willing to act on a bad result. A single lopsided result broadcast to a global television audience turned out to be enough to end a 6-month tenure. That one decision became the opening data point in a much longer, much larger pattern across the rest of the tournament. Tunisia was first. It was very far from being the only federation willing to make that kind of quick decision. Tunisia's coach was gone before the group stage had even finished. He would not turn out to be the last one. Germany reached the round of 32, then lost to Paraguay on penalty kicks after a 1-1 draw in regulation. Head coach Julian Nagelsmann stepped down from the position within just a few days of that elimination. Multiple reports placed the value of his exit package at roughly €7 million, paid out even though he chose to leave on his own. That is the financial side of these coaching departures that almost never makes it into the highlight reel or the headline. A federation does not just lose a coach when a tournament ends badly, it also pays real money to make that departure official. Germany's federation had reportedly already been quietly exploring other candidates before the tournament had even fully ended. The Netherlands suffered a similar fate, eliminated in that same round of 32, this time by Morocco. Head coach Ronald Koeman announced his own departure from the role shortly after that elimination was confirmed. It was his second spell in charge of the Dutch national team, and now, for the second time, it was over. Uruguay's tournament ended even earlier than Germany's or the Netherlands, with an elimination in the group stage itself. Longtime manager Marcelo Bielsa left the position once that group stage elimination had been fully confirmed by the federation. Scotland's story carried a genuinely different kind of weight. This was their first World Cup finals appearance in 28 years. Head coach Steve Clarke had spent years of his career simply trying to get Scotland back onto this stage at all. Once the team finally arrived, it was eliminated in the group stage, and Clarke stepped down from the role soon afterward. Croatia's federation lost one of its longest-serving and most respected figures when head coach Zlatko Dalic also stepped away. Dalic had guided Croatia all the way to a World Cup final years earlier, one of the longest coaching tenures in modern international football. Even a long and genuinely successful run does not guarantee a coach stays on past a tournament that falls short of expectations. 6 different federations, 6 very different tournament outcomes, and 6 head coaches gone within weeks of one another. Some of them left by their own choice, some were pushed out. The paperwork often blurs the line between the two. A resignation announced through a federation's own press release is not always quite as voluntary as it first sounds. What connects almost all of these cases is timing. Every single one happened inside a narrow window right after elimination. A World Cup does not just crown a single champion, it also quietly triggers a wave of contract terminations right across the sport. And by this point in the tournament's aftermath, that wave was still nowhere near finished. Portugal's tournament had ended in the round of 16, a 1-0 loss against eventual champions Spain. Head coach Roberto Martinez stepped down from the position in the days that immediately followed that elimination. Portugal's federation moved quickly this time, announcing a permanent replacement before speculation had much time to settle in. The new head coach was Jorge Jesus, 71 years old, signed to a 4-year contract running all the way through 2030. It was reportedly his first ever job leading a national team, after more than 3 decades spent entirely managing club sides. His resume included spells at some of Portugal's biggest domestic clubs, plus stops in Brazil, Turkey, and Saudi Arabia along the way. Most recently, he had guided a Saudi club to a league title in the season right before Portugal came calling. That same Saudi club also employed a familiar veteran forward, one Portugal's federation clearly hoped might stay involved a little longer. The relationship between the new head coach and that veteran forward had already been built years earlier at club level. Portugal's federation was not just hiring a new head coach, it was also hiring continuity with a player officials still wanted around. This is the part of coaching turnover that rarely gets discussed in the same breath as the original firing or resignation. Every single departure creates a fresh hiring decision, and every hiring decision carries its own cost and its own risk. A 4-year contract for a 71-year-old first-time national team head coach is itself a fairly significant bet. Federations are not simply reacting to results on the field. They are trying to buy stability after a tournament that offered very little of it.
Severance packages, signing bonuses, and relocation costs all add up quietly across dozens of federations making these decisions at once.
None of these individual figures show up anywhere inside the tournament's own official revenue reports. They sit instead in separate federation budgets, negotiated privately, and rarely announced with anywhere near the same detail as prize money. A national federation can publish its World Cup earnings down to the very last sponsorship dollar without much hesitation. It almost never publishes exactly what it just paid a departing coach, simply to walk away quietly. That gap between the public numbers and the private ones is really where a lot of this story actually lives. The players themselves get contracts covered by collective agreements and reasonably public salary structures across most federations. Coaches largely do not get that same treatment. Their exits get negotiated case by case, federation by federation. That is part of why a €7 million severance figure stood out enough to actually get reported at all. It is one of the very few numbers from this entire coaching turnover story that actually became public knowledge. Partway through the tournament, the earliest running tallies of coaching departures put the total number at around 7. That number kept climbing steadily week after week, long after the final whistle had already blown in the final itself. By the time every federation had finished making its post-tournament decisions, sports outlets counted at least 17 head coaches gone. 17 head coaches representing 17 different national federations, all departing within roughly 1 month of one another. Some left after just 1 match, like Tunisia. Some left after exactly 4 matches, like Germany and the Netherlands. Some left after a long, widely respected career, like Croatia's Dalic. Some left right after finally reaching the stage they had chased for nearly 3 decades, like Scotland's Clarke. The real gap worth paying attention to here is between that early running count and the eventual final count. Any single number reported in the middle of a fast-moving story is really just a snapshot of a process still in motion. 7 looked like the full total for a while during the tournament. It was never actually the full total. The same pattern holds true for most of the big figures tied to a tournament this size, whether that is attendance, revenue, or a coaching carousel. The trophy itself went to Spain. The record for the single fastest coaching dismissal in World Cup history went to Tunisia, and the largest wave of national team coaching turnover in World Cup history went almost entirely unannounced as any kind of single unified story. It happened instead across 17 separate press releases, 17 separate federations, and 17 separate decisions, each made under its own kind of pressure. Compound World tracks the events, decisions, and power structures behind the games themselves, built on numbers that are actually checked, never simply guessed.